So today we're going to cover Chapter 8, Section 2, and we're going to cover the Law of Cosines. So these formulas are a little bit more complicated than the Law of Sines. So generally, in the past, we have given these on a reference sheet. However, we don't give usually the alternate forms, and the alternate forms are just the standard form rearranged and solved for the cosine. So the first one's the standard form that's listed there. This is used when you're given the side angle side scenario. The alternate form is when you're given three sides, side, side, side. So really all you have to do is memorize the standard form, and you can solve or rearrange those equations algebraically. But if you want to memorize them, it does make it a lot easier. So let's go through the steps. Notice right here, it says to find the largest angle first. So when you're given side, 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 which is going to be the first example I do, you have to find the largest angle first. Otherwise, your answers will be wrong. So let's take a look. Now, the way that I can tell which side or which angle is the biggest by looking to see out of my three sides that they gave me, which side is the biggest, which is the 19. So since 19 is the biggest number here, this tells me that angle B is going to be my largest angle. And I'm going to solve for this one first. So the steps that we're going to follow, there's three. Because notice when we go to use law of cosines, what we're trying to do here is solve the triangle. And we already have three pieces. So now we have to find the other three pieces, which we don't have. And in this scenario, it's the three angles. So step number one, we're going to find the largest angle first. And what we're going to do is we're going to use law of cosines. Then step number two, we need to find one of the two remaining angles. Now, when we're doing side, 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 it really doesn't matter which one we find next. But to stay consistent, what we're going to do is we're going to find the smallest angle second. And then the third step, to find that last angle, all we're going to do is use the triangle sum. We'll add the two that we find in steps 1 and 2 and subtract that from 180. So when we find the smallest angle, though, we're going to be using law of sines. So we're only going to use one of those formulas on that previous slide, those law of cosines. We're only going to use one of those one time. Then the second step, we're going to do a proportion, use law of sines, and then the third step, just our triangle sum. Add the two angles we find in steps 1 and 2 and subtract that from 180. So let's try this. So again, step number one, find the largest angle first. So my largest angle, I can tell, is angle B because it's opposite the biggest side, which is the 19. So the formula I'm going to use is the alternate ones at the bottom of the slide. So I'm going to be doing cosine of B is equal to A squared plus C squared minus B squared over 2 times A times C. And now all I'm going to do is fill in my numbers. So I don't know the cosine. I don't know angle B. I know side length A, it's 8, C is 14, B is 19. And then 2 times 8 times 14. Now, if you practice with your calculator, you could probably do this continuous. You may have to add some parentheses. So this is why it's going to be important that you practice with your calculator. I'm going to go ahead and simplify it. I'm going to square the numbers and then add and subtract and then multiply. So here, cosine of B, I'm going to square the 8. I get 64. The 14 squared is 196. the 19 squared is 361. And then for the denominator, 2 times 8 times 14 gives me 224. I'm going to go ahead and subtract and add that numerator. 64 plus 96 minus 361 gives me negative 101. Now, you may not necessarily have to do this step by step. Again, practice with your calculator. My advice to you, though, when you take this quiz, show me what you're attempting to put into your calculator because there may be partial credit. However, if all you have is an answer on the line with no showing me what you tried to do, there is no partial credit. You lose everything. So make sure that you at least give me this part so I can at least see where you're trying to go. So now, remember, when we look for an angle, we're doing the inverse. So we're going to do cosine -1. So once I divide negative 101 by 224, I'm going to be putting in here in my cosine -1, negative 0.45089287. Do not round. And then once you hit enter, we're going to get angle B is equal to 116.80 degrees. This is rounded to the hundreds place. So this was step 1, and we used the law of cosines. Step number 2, we're going to use the law of sines. And we're going to look for the smallest angle. So this is where I'm going to go back to look at my sides again. And my smallest side is the 8. So I'm going to find angle A next. So A over the sine of A. I'm using law of sines now. I don't have to use law of cosines twice. I'm only going to do it once. And then equals, and I'm going to go back to my angle I just found. So I'm going to do B over the sine of B. So now let's fill in our numbers. So side A was 8. Sine of A, I don't know angle A, that's what I'm solving for. And then side B was 19. And then the sine of 116.8. Multiply now. So I'm going to do the cross products. So I'm going to multiply sine of A times 19. And then 8 times the sine of 116.8. So I get 19 times the sine of A is equal to 8 times the sine of 116.8. I'm dividing both sides by 19 to get sine of A by itself. So that cancels that. So then now I get sine of A. So really I'm doing inverse because again I'm looking for an angle. And this crazy long decimal is going to be 0.375825678. And then this will give me angle A, after I hit enter, is going to be 41.12 degrees. And now lastly, step 3, we use the triangle sum. So probably what would be the easiest for you guys to do is instead of adding these two, just do 180 minus the angle you just found, minus the first angle you just found, and that'll give you the last angle, angle C, and that's going to be, thank you. All right, so this should be, sorry, I looked at the wrong number. Angle A is 41.12. Let me fix this. This is 22. So when you do this on your calculator, you should be getting 22.08. And then here, let me fix this, 22.08. And then you get the 41.12. So we're already originally given all 3 sides. So when we're done, we should have 3 angles. So 41.12, 22.08, 116.8 or 80. And then we had the 3 sides from the beginning. A was 8, B was 19, C was 14. And again, my answers are making sense. Okay, this is the biggest side and angle, and it matches. And then if you go to the smallest side, it's across from the smallest angle. And then the medium size, the middle one. Making sense? So for this lesson, you're only doing law of cosine one time, and then the second step is law of sines, and then the third step is just that triangle sum. When we have the side angle side scenario, steps, it'll be the same steps, but we use the standard form in step 1 instead of an alternate form. But step 2, still law of sines, smallest angle. Step 3, still triangle sum. Everybody good? Yes?
We don't have to find like a second triangle?
No, not for cosine.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody good? So this SAS, it's going to be the included angle. So I'll show you that on the next slide, what makes it different. Now what's going to be challenging on the quiz is I'm not going to say use law of cosines to solve the triangle. I'm just going to say solve the triangle. So you have to recognize what you need to use. And there's one question in the homework tonight that'll say, what do you use? Law of sines or law of cosines? So for example, let me just add a slide here. So when you're going to do law of cosines, you're going to be given side angle side or side side side. When you're going to do law of sines first, it's either going to be the angle angle side, the angle side angle, or the angle side side or side side angle. Those will be the scenarios you have when you do law of sines first. This is when you're going to do law of cosines first, when it's side angle side. And let me show you the difference between these two, because if you notice, they both have two S's, but the location of the angle is what makes it different. So when it's an SAS scenario, you're going to have, let's say this angle is 25. Let's say that's A. And then you won't have the side across from that. You'll be given the two sides on either side. So this is why it's SAS, but when it's ASS, your triangle is going to look like this. It'll be 25, 10, and 15. So it would be an ASS. Notice the A on this one is made by the two sides you have. That's the difference between the two. It's the included angle, or the angle that's formed by the two sides of the two numbers they give you. Here's the other scenario where we're going to use law of cosines first. Notice that they have given me an angle and two sides. So in this case, I'm not sure if it is this ASS or the SSA, or if it's going to be SAS. But what you can do is you can tell that if you're missing the side across from the angle that's given, then it's going to be the SAS. So let's go ahead and sketch this. So A is up here. It doesn't really matter where you put the angle, B and C. And then this would be little b. It's 9, little c's here. And again, notice the two sides that were given are making that angle. So that's how I know it's the side angle side scenario and not the SSA, which is the ambiguous case. So what I'm going to do is the steps for this one. Step number 1 is I'm going to find the missing side that's across from the angle that's given. So I'm going to be finding a side first. So I'm going to find the missing side of the angle that's given. So in this particular problem, I'm finding little a. Then step number 2, just like the side, side, side scenario, I'm going to find the smallest angle next. And then the last one, all we do is use the triangle sum. So steps 2 and 3 are the same for side, 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 and side angle side. What's different is step 1, and this one, we're using law of cosines in step 1, and in step 2, it's law of sines. So this is law of sines. So step 1, when it's side, 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 and side angle side, is always going to be law of cosines. Step 2, always law of sines. And then step 3, triangle sum. So let's go ahead, and the formula I'm going to use, because I'm looking for side A, is going to be that standard form, that very first one that's written down. And it's going to be a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2 times b times c times the cosine of a. In these formulas, this beginning and end have the same letter. It's the side, and then it ends with the angle. Now, this one again, be careful with your calculator, because some calculators, if you try to put this continuous in your calculator, it may follow order of operations and mess things up. Because what you need to recognize is this quantity right here is all being multiplied. So let's try filling it in. So I have a squared, my b is 9, my c is 12, and then 2 times b times c times the cosine of 25. So again, you can try to enter this in your calculator straight through like this, see if you get the right answer. If not, you can do it step by step. 9 squared, 81, 12 squared, 144. And then if I multiply just these three, this is going to give me negative 216 times the cosine of 25. Now, the big mistake I see is students think that they can add and subtract those numbers and then do the cosine 25. Don't do that, because this whole amount is being multiplied. So again, practice with your calculator to see, can you get away with just doing all of this all at once? Maybe so. Or maybe you need to add in a couple extra parentheses. So let's go ahead and simplify this. Now I could add these two and then multiply this and then subtract. So 81 plus 144 is 225. And then minus 195.762482 is 216 times the cosine of 25. Now I'll subtract that, and I don't want a squared, so I'll have to square root it. So a squared, after I subtract that, I get 29.237518, square root both sides. And I don't want a negative answer, so I'm just going to keep the positive. It's 5.4071782, but rounded to the hundreds place, 5.41. So step 1, we had to find the side across from the angle that was given. Step 2, now we're using law of sines, and we're going to find the smaller of the two angles that remain. And if I look up here at my B and C, I can see the smaller number here is the 9. So I'm going to find angle B next. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my law of sines. And I'm going to look for angle B. So I'm going to use my A that I just found and angle A that they gave me from the beginning, and then B over the sine of B. So let's fill it in. So I'll use the rounded number, the 5.41, over the sine of 25. And then I know side length B, it's 9, but I don't know angle B. So now I'm going to cross multiply. So once I cross multiply, I am going to get 5.41 times the sine of B is equal to the blue, 9 times the sine of 25. And then I have to divide by 5.41. And I get, and remember when we're looking for the angle, it'll be inverse after I get this decimal. Once I divide this, I get 0.7030618,033. And then angle B is equal to, after I do second sine with that decimal, I get 44.67. In the last step, all we're going to do is the triangle sum. So you guys are using a calculator, so I would just do 180, and then I would subtract the 25, and then subtract this 44.67, and that'll give you the last angle, angle C. Then angle C is 110.33. So now I've completed my triangle. I found all 6 pieces. So angle A was given 25. I found angle B, the 44.67. Angle C, the 110.33. I found side length A first. It was the 5.41. B was given to me, and C was given to me. And my triangle is complete. Now, this is a typo on example 3. This should be a lowercase letter a, because notice the units, it's centimeters. So this tells me that these are the 3 sides, because they're all linear units. So this is the side scenario. So again, remember when it's side, we have to solve for the biggest angle first. So my biggest side, so this is the largest or the longest side, so the largest angle is going to be angle C. And that's what we're going to find first. So again, remember your steps. You're going to find the largest angle first using law of cosines. Then step 2, we're going to find the smallest angle next. Using law of sines. And then step 3, we're just going to use the triangle sum. So remember, when it's the side scenario, to make our solving process easier, we can use that alternate form. You could still use the standard form, but you're just going to be working backwards in the formula using inverse operations. So because I'm going to be looking for an angle, I'm going to be doing, and I'm looking for angle C, I'm going to do cosine of C is equal to a squared plus b squared minus c squared over 2 times a times b. And I'm going to fill in my numbers. So cosine of C is equal to 6 squared plus 8 squared minus 12 squared over 2 times a times b, which is 6 and 8. And again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do it step by step. You could, again, practice with your calculator. You may not need to do what I'm doing. And then now I'll multiply 2, 6, and 8, and I get 96. Then I'm going to go ahead and add that numerator and then subtract. So 36 plus 64 is 100, minus 144 is negative 44. And now, because I'm looking for an angle, I'm doing inverse. So cosine negative 1. Once I divide negative 44 by 96, I get negative 0.4583 repeating. Once I hit enter, angle C is equal to 117.28 degrees. Step 2, I'm gonna find my smallest angle, and if you go up here, the smallest side is the 6. So I'm gonna find my smallest side, which is gonna be A. So I'm gonna be doing law of sines, so step 2, law of sines now. I'm gonna find the smallest, which is A over the sine of A is equal to C over the sine of C. So A is 6. I don't know angle A. I know side length C is 12, and I just found angle C, so sine of 117.28. I'm going to cross multiply, and I get 12 times the sine of A is equal to 6 times the sine of 117.28. Divide both sides by 12. And then again, I'm doing inverse because it's an angle. And this long decimal is going to be 0.444388637. And then angle A is equal to 26.38 degrees. And now the last step, all we do is triangle sum. So I'm just going to do 180 minus the first angle I found. And again, it doesn't matter the order you subtract. So minus 117.28 and then minus 26.38. If you'd rather add the two angles and then subtract from 180, you can do that as well. And then my last angle was angle B. And angle B is going to be 36.34 degrees. So again, angle A was the 26.38, angle B 36.34, angle C 117.28, and again, we started out with all three sides. So B was 8, C is 12, and A was 6. And again, it makes sense. Biggest side, biggest angle. Smallest side, smallest angle. Okay, so this problem, if you notice how it's drawn, it's the side angle side scenario. So it'll help you if you go ahead and draw it because it could be the SSA scenario. But when it's the included angle, the angle that's formed by the two sides that are given, then it's the SAS, and you do have to use law of cosines. So again, remember your steps are going to be, we're going to use the law of cosines when it's SSS or SAS. So our first step is using the law of cosines. And whenever it's SAS, we're going to find the side of, or we're going to find the side across from the angle that's given. And now just to stay consistent, step 2 is always going to be to find the smaller of the two remaining angles. So technically the smallest angle. And then step 3, we're going to use the triangle sum. So let's go ahead and take a look. So since they gave us angle A, we're going to be finding side length A, and we're going to be using the standard form of the law of cosines. So A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2BC times the cosine of A. And again, notice the beginning and the end, they have the same letter, but one's uppercase, one's lowercase. So now let's just fill in our numbers. So I don't know A. So A squared is equal to B squared plus C squared minus 2 times B times C times the cosine of A, which is 80. So let me come on down here where I have more room. So now I have a squared is equal to 16 squared, which is 256. C squared, which is 12 squared, which is 144. And then let me go ahead and multiply these three numbers, but I still have the cosine of 80 there. So this is 384 times the cosine of 80. Do not be tempted to take care of these numbers first, because again, remember, this quantity is being multiplied and you need to get that number. You could go ahead and add the b squared and the c squared if you choose. But again, I can't stress enough, practice with your calculator. Once I multiply 384 times the cosine of 80, I get 66.68090022. Once I subtract that, I get a squared is equal to 333.3190998. I need to square root it. And then my a value rounded to the hundreds place is 18.26 meters. So now that was using law of cosines. So now step 2, I use law of sines, and I'm going to find the smaller of the remaining angles, and my smaller side is c, it's 12. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my proportion. C over the sine of c is equal to a over the sine of a. I'm using the angle that I had from the beginning and my newly calculated side length a. So now I'll fill in my numbers. I know c is 12. I do not know angle c yet. That's what I'm solving for. And then a is 18.26. And then angle a was the 80. We're going to cross multiply and then divide. So once I cross multiply, I get 18.26 times the sine of c is equal to 12 times the sine of 80. I'm going to divide both sides by 18.26. And again, remember you're looking for an angle measure. So we're doing inverse here. So I'm going to be putting in 12 times the sine of 80 divided by 18.26, 0.647190199. Once I do this, I get angle C is equal to 40.33 degrees. And then lastly, step 3, triangle sum. And all I have to do is 180 minus the 80 from the beginning, the angle I just found, and this is going to give me 59.67 degrees for angle B. My triangle is now complete. I have angle A that I had from the beginning. I found side length A, that was the 18.26, and these are meters. I found angle B. Angle B was the last thing I just calculated, the 59.67 degrees. Angle B, 59.67, angle C, 40.33, and then side length B and side length C were given to me from the beginning. And my triangle is complete. So one thing that you could probably notice when it's side angle side is you'll have one of each letter. So if you notice from the beginning, I had angle A, side B, side C. So notice I had each letter represented even though one was an angle. So that could be a clue too, that you could recognize that you do have the side angle side scenario. All right, so this is the formula when you're given all three sides, side, side, side. So notice the S though in the formula here, we have to calculate that by adding the three sides that are given. So we'll add A plus B plus C and divide it by 2. That'll give us our S value. So let's try an example. So they gave me side, side, side. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. And this capital A that's here, remember that's just representing the word area. So side times side minus A, side minus B, side minus C, all under the radical. So let's go ahead and calculate our S value. by doing A plus B plus C divided by 2. So my A is 43, my B is 53, my C is 72, and then we'll divide it by 2. So adding this, I get 168, and then divided by 2, and my S value that I'm going to plug in the formula is 84. So every spot that I see in S, I'm going to put the 84. And then the A, B, and C are going to come from up here. So let's fill it in now. So area equals 84 times 84 minus 43, 84 minus 53, 84 minus 72, and this is all under the square root. So we have to follow order of operations. We'll subtract each one of the parentheses. So 84, this gives me 41 when I subtract, 31, and then 12. I'm going to multiply those 4 numbers and then square root and round to the nearest 100. So 84 times 41 times 31 times 12, 1281168, still under the square root. And then once I square root it, my final answer for the area, 1,131.89 meters squared. It's always the units squared. In yesterday's notes, remember you were given the area formula when you were given a side angle side scenario. Or was it? So again, yesterday's formula, you would have been given side angle side. Today's formula is for side, side, side. Now, as you saw in yesterday's homework, that last question, you were given 2 angles in a side. So you had to use law of sines to complete the triangle first, then you could have calculated the area. So if you're not given everything you need, either a side, 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 or a side angle side, then you're going to use either law of sines or cosines to get the pieces you need. And then you can use the formulas.